Hey everyone, welcome to Neighbor Science, the only podcast about political economy and anime. I'm Ryan Salisbury, and with me today I have a cyber brain that I have fed information from past episodes of the show, and it has come up with a composite personality to help me host the show, since both Peter and Chris are gone. So hi, composite host.
Hello. This is your composite host. I can't do it. I can't keep a straight face. Or can
I? So we got Peter today. Peter wanted to do an episode on Ghost in the Shell. So what prompted you to do that?
So with lockdown stuff and everything, I've been sitting and binging a whole bunch of torrents, and one of the torrents that dropped a few weeks ago was the latest iteration of Ghost in the Shell, Ghost in the Shell SAC 2045.
Which, despite watching every anime, I surprisingly haven't watched yet. So Peter's ahead of me on this one.
Yeah. For once in my life, I'm ahead of Ryan on anime, and it is, I'm not going to lie to you, it is a thrilling feeling.
I've been too busy watching every single isekai anime, and Kami no To, and Ascendance of a Bookworm. So.
Yeah, there's no need to lord it over me.
But I did watch 8 episodes of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, so I'm not totally free from sin? I don't know.
Sin? I love that that's a question. Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into not the storyline of Ghost in the Shell, but the larger world of Ghost in the Shell. Because in watching everything, it starts off Do I need to give a spoiler warning?
No.
Does anyone care enough about the new one to like hack us and murder us in our sleep?
I think everyone that listens knows that we spoil everything and don't warn anyone about it.
Awesome, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the latest iteration of Ghost in the Shell, you've got it's fast forwarded about 15 years into the future. And
is it actually in 2045?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, more like 2046-ish. 2045.
Oh,
late
well,
25.
Okay. Jeez.
Sorry, late 45.
I apologize for being
46.
so off.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be 16 years after a Standalone Complex, which is in 2030.
Exactly. So, and basically what has happened is the world has gone to absolute hell in a handbasket. It's shit. Mm-hmm. Everything is shit. There has been what is referred to as the
global simultaneous default.
That's right. The global simultaneous default. And basically, because of this, there's a massive push to improve on the state of all AI, and AI basically gets out of control, and it's up to Major Kusanagi and Bato and everyone to bring everything back under control.
Okay.
And so what got me interested was obviously with our history of looking at political economy in anime, here we have the almost ideal situation to assess with a global simultaneous default, and what then results in what is known within the series as sustainable war. Now, when I first brought this up to Ryan, he was like, well, I hope this means like Green New Deal, Elizabeth Warren kind of war.
Yeah, if you corrected me on that, I have since forgotten, because there was nothing under the sustainable war heading when I was adding to the notes yesterday, so I changed it because I was like, oh, well, there's sustainable capitalism stuff in Standalone Complex. I could talk about that.
Okay, no, well, I didn't expand on the sustainable war stuff, but I did look, obviously watch the series, and I got a better understanding of what's going on. And what they're basically saying is that because the global economy is in a state of collapse as AI takes over everything, the big four nations, which are the last remnants of the world powerhouses that haven't balkanized, are now in a never-ending war. That is pretty much the only thing that keeps the global economy going, according to the mythos of Ghost in the Shell. Now, setting aside the realism of a situation like that, whether that's actually a thing that could happen, I don't think it is. But setting that aside, that's what got me interested in doing this episode.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay, now, just to be clear, the world of Ghost in the Shell is not a single coherent whole. Instead, we see various iterations with timelines that overlap and contradict each other. But I don't think that this really affects our ability to broadly analyze the Ghost in the Shell universe and the power dynamics within it. The various stories presented offer a relatively coherent thematic premise. Anyone who's watched Ghost in the Shell will understand that what they're driving at is geared towards human consciousness and that dividing line between what makes us human and what makes us cybernetic.
An anime fan? Oh, okay.
And an anime fan, yeah. I actually think that Ghost in the Shell is probably the most in-depth look at the ancient Greek problem of Theseus's ship. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, that's essentially the kernel of what makes Ghost in the Shell, is looking at, if I replace everything in the human body, is it still that person?
Right.
And
I think I've made a joke about that on the show before, but I don't remember what it was in reference to.
Yeah, and also anything prior to right now doesn't exist. So
That's true.
We're just gonna forget that you've made any jokes in the past, because let's face it, you're not that funny to begin with.
If you replace every moment in time with your reality bending powers, is it still the reality that you started with?
Well, if it's me doing it, yes. I am that powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we go on off on one of our famous sidetracks, I just want to make a note of the fact that a lot of the history that I've used for my research actually comes predominantly from the manga, not from the anime itself, because the anime alludes to some of the things that have happened in the past, but very rarely is it explicitly put out. Whereas the original manga, my God, there's a lot of text. I'm not
it tends to be a
kidding.
big thing with manga.
No idea.
They do a lot of text stuff.
No, not tech. Text.
Yeah.
As in. No, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to describe this adequately. The manga specifically focuses on explaining technical details, political situations, the history of certain decisions, the power dynamics, everything in, it takes up half the page in most cases. It's insanely text-based. It's one of the things that allowed for the first movie to be so richly developed the way that it was. I mean, they didn't just take.
Well, some of us, Peter, have read 5-Star Stories, which has a 10,000-year timeline in every issue.
Okay, well, as far as I'm concerned, there's no difference between most manga and a standard DC comic book. So, okay, yeah. So, essentially everything that I ended up looking at, because I wasn't going to sit and watch Standalone Complex again on top of watching Standalone Complex 2045.
You're just not dedicated enough.
I'm not. I really am not. I'm not going to lie about that at all. Yeah, so most of it's drawn from the manga, and I just want to say straight up, for anyone who is wondering should they not watch this latest incarnation of Ghost in the Shell, go for it. It's nowhere near as bad as the Scarlett Johansson abomination. And also, I would just like to say that from now on, besides that one mention, I would appreciate it if we never, ever, 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 ever mention that it even exists ever again.
No problem.
Okay, cool.
Still haven't watched it.
Okay, so shall we... Good. Don't. Watched what? I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know either.
Yeah. So shall I just take a very quick look at the history, at the timeline of everything?
Yeah, go for it, man.
So in 1991, within the Ghost in the Shell universe now, everything, all the dates that I'm giving now, all the years, because I'm not going into specific dates, all the years now are within the Ghost in the Shell universe. From 1991 onwards, that's where the Ghost in the Shell universe and regular old history depart from one another. So 91, Russia returns the 4 Kuril Islands. Kuril? I don't know how to say it. Kuril.
I don't know. I assume you say it like a Russian guy.
Which includes Etorofu and Iturup. So the Kuril Islands is actually a real dispute, and it's actually still ongoing. We won't get into the details here because it actually is it's a tangential issue that never gets fully explained or discussed in the Ghost in the Shell universe. But it is worth noting that this is the point from which we can see divergence between their timeline and the real world. Then jumping ahead to 99, Beijing gets struck by a meteor, which brings an end to the Communist Party. I'm not sure how.
Okay.
And that
the
leads
worst
to
enemies of the Communist
reunification.
Party, fascists and meteors.
Yeah. So yeah, that ends up leading to the reunification of Taiwan and China. Now, from my perspective, that says a lot more about the author's views on politics and economics and everything than it does about reality. I don't think there's much nuance in the understanding of communism, but as we can see throughout the show, there is quite a bit of focus on capitalism as they understand it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing in Standalone Complex because there is a character that's supposed to be a, quote, ultra-left activist, and they don't seem to have a solid understanding of left-wing politics. But they're definitely not...
Yeah,
I don't think they're fascist because they don't just view them as, like, you know, an evil piece of shit, like, mass-murdering psycho. It's like a kind of a liberal's view of a leftist, like a misguided, like overly preachy type of guy, you know?
I see. So.
But I mean, that was probably the show
leftist
creators and not necessarily
Yeah.
Masamune Shiro.
Yeah. Now, again, this is obviously it's tangential. I just thought it was really interesting that the Communist Party could be destroyed by a meteor in Beijing.
Oh, and just because I was wondering, the manga, the original run is from April 1989 to November 1990. So that's why the timeline starts in 91.
Yeah. And that also explains the very anti-communist kind of almost setting that we get to see here. So, jumping to the early 2000s, you then have World War III, which it's unclear, but it possibly ends by about 2002. The story never explains the cause of the war, like what started it. But it is made very clear, obviously, that it's a global nuclear war with multiple cities getting the nuke treatment. The war involves mostly wealthy developed nations, obviously because these are the ones that actually have access to nukes. And it most heavily affects America and China, with Eurasia obviously also taking substantial damage. Tokyo gets nuked.
I hope it's like Ai Weiwei assassinates George Bush.
Oh god, that would be so much fun. What? Someone needs to do that as an actual anime.
I thought you meant someone needs to do that. I agree. Doesn't have to be Ai Weiwei.
No, I don't need to. And I'm not here to advocate violence that people very clearly deserve. But yeah, if someone were to do that, I'm not saying don't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just, follow your instincts, obey your thirst. Okay, so Tokyo also gets nuked, which results not in the fall of the Japanese economic and political model, but they move the capital to Fukuoka, which is weird to me because apparently a meteor can end the Communist Party, but a nuke in Tokyo somehow doesn't end the Japanese capitalist system.
Yeah, and I think if a meteor hit China, it would pretty severely affect Japan.
Yes, it would. Very, very severely. Okay, now, the reason that the capital is moved from Tokyo to Fukuoka is because Tokyo, after being nuked, suddenly starts sinking below sea level. Apparently it got punctured and it just deflated and it sank into the pool. But because Japan never really committed its military forces to the war, because of Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, they come out of World War III pretty much unscathed except for a nuke or two, which obviously they've got more experience with than anyone else and know how to bounce back from. Now, as a result of the war, the global geopolitical landscape has become heavily balkanized. By this, I mean that even formerly strong first world countries like the United States are divided into smaller, less stable competitors. The America specifically forms the American Empire. There's a Russian-American set of balkanized states.
I bet it's led by freaking Donald Trump, too. Donald Trump and Putin, his boyfriend. Because they're gay together.
Yeah, but I mean,
they like butt sex. They like having sex with each other because they're gay.
I've seen that picture of Putin on the horse without the shirt, and I'm not gonna lie, if I weren't married, So yeah, so now you've got a world that's basically split up into these micronations of sorts, and everywhere you look, it's just civil wars breaking out and non-state revolutionary movements, which pose like a constant security threat worldwide.
Hell yeah!
And there's millions of refugees displaced by all of this fighting, and it actually becomes a major problem. Who would have thought?
Get it? Because the Major's a character.
Oh my god, did you just make a dad joke?
Yeah.
That's awesome, Ryan. I'm so proud of you. God, now I want to go to the States just to give you a hug, if only they weren't a travel ban. Okay, so then The North American continent, like I said, is now dominated, but not entirely under the jurisdiction of the American Empire, which interestingly competed bitterly with the state of Mexico for land and resources south of the former borders of the United States.
I hope Mexico got a little get back there.
Oh, dude, you don't even know. By the end of it all, Mexico, they absolutely pummel the American Empire.
Nice.
Pummel them. Anyway, so a year after the supposed end of World War III, Major Kusanagi is born, and it's worth noting and interesting that by the year 2009, she's fully cyberized. So she was fully cyberized from the age of 6, which is a very interesting move by the author.
Yeah, they talk about that in the series.
Yeah.
Because I think she got in a car accident and she was paralyzed from like the neck down, and she was one of the first people who got full body cyberization.
Now, one of the reasons that I thought that this was interesting is because of Elongated Muskrat and his investment in, I think it's called Linksys or Uplink.
That's a router company.
Yeah, no, I can't remember now what the company's name is, but they're busy working on brain implant technologies that are supposed to help people with locked-in syndrome, people with major
Neuralink.
Physical Neuralink. That's it. So essentially he's trying to develop the first Matrix plugin, which I'm not sure how many people are going to go for it. Obviously, all the Elon Musk fanboys are going to be first to line up and be like, I want one.
Yeah, it's going to be like a brain slug. Yeah.
And look, in the same way that in the series, Major Kusanagi as a medical case is fully cyberized by the time she's 6. The idea is that these technologies are first introduced as necessary for medical interventions in the same way that Neuralink is aiming to do, which is why I've made that as a point here. Okay, jumping ahead to 2015, and Japan develops microtechnology capable of scrubbing radiation from the environment. I'm not sure how they would do this, and if I did, I would develop it, and apparently I would become a world superpower.
I know how to do it. I just, I don't really want to.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, who wants that?
Yeah. Because if you could, then, you would have, like, Fukushimas and all that sort of stuff, like, all the time. She'll just be like, who cares? We can just get radiation everywhere. Doesn't matter.
But on the other side, it would also lead to a shift in the global balance of power like it does in the Ghost in the Shell universe, because it reduces the threat of nuclear fallout, and thus reduces
on the other hand, world power might be nice.
Nuclear weapons. Yeah, like, come on, look at Japan, they're sitting pretty. So Japan now leverages this new technology that they've dubbed the Japanese miracle to escalate its global superiority, while nations that depend on the threat of nuclear weapons are heavily undermined. The result of this newfound power and the dwindling influence of the now American empire is that Japan enters into a security pact with the American empire. And the pact is actually, like, it's brought up by the American empire specifically to gain access to the Japanese miracle. They want to be the first ally of the new world superpower. And then straight away it breaks out into World War IV. Now, World War IV is a non-nuclear war that broke out in the Vietnam region, also known as the Second Vietnam War, which then deadlocked Europe and Asia in a war of attrition by 2020. Japan, with their new security pact with the American Empire, are not permitted to deploy their military outside of Japan. So again, they take no part in the war, which allows them to come out on top once again by the time the war is over. So
now that's kind of weird that Japan is supposed to be like the lead in this relationship. Like they develop this miracle technology, and the U.S. comes to them for an alliance, and then is it? I mean, Japan and the American Empire aren't fighting each other in World War IV, right? So
no.
So why does the U.S. have an unequal treaty with Japan, like after World War II, where Japan was the aggressor? That's very strange.
I think what he's getting at here is that the American Empire still is very influential in the UN at this stage. The UN is still a thing. So neither America nor Japan are actually heavily involved in World War IV. It's more about it being between various Asian nations as well as between Asia and Europe.
Okay.
So he's basically setting up the decline of everyone that isn't Japan.
Gotcha.
But so that by the time Ghost in the Shell gets started, we understand why Japan is the most important country in the world. Okay, so that one's cool?
Yep.
Now, moving on to 2020, just to note there's a little bit of an overlap here. World War IV takes place between 2015 and 2024. In 2020, the Mexican War starts. Now, this is when the American Empire attempt to gain control of Mexico and most of Latin South America.
I would argue that the Mexican War started in 1989 when Ronald Reagan started the war on drugs.
Yeah, but boom. I mean that's 2 years. That's 2 years before the start of the divergence in timelines. So I don't think he actually knew too much about that at the time.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I'll forgive him that. Yeah. In the Ghost in the Shell universe, the American Empire calls for the deployment of UN troops under the pretext of overthrowing the corrupt Mexican and other Southern American governments. Where have I heard that before?
About 50 times in the last 50 years.
Yeah. It's all coming back to me now. Now, through carpet bombing, mechanized troops, and wartime atrocities, which actually gets like really heavy and horrible. The combined UN forces moved through the regions to sweep up the remaining guerrillas. During this time, hundreds of mercenary groups surfaced throughout the war-torn Central and South American regions, which is populated by the remnants of armies once connected to nations that no longer exist. Also, during this time, there were several unofficial operations that involved Japanese UN troops. Now, that's interesting because now we're seeing that Japan its own military doesn't get involved, but Japan, as part of the UN, has to commit a certain number of troops to UN peacekeeping forces, and thus they can get involved with wars as long as it's through the UN. Now, in 2024, you finally get the Korean Peninsular War, which is when war broke out between North and South Korea, leading to reunification. I'm not sure how this works. At the end of the war, everyone calls a truce and, we should reunite. I don't think since war is what originally separated North and South Korea, I don't think war is what's going to bring it back together.
Yeah, that sounds like wishful thinking, mostly.
Yeah. But again, for the convenience of the storyline leading up to the start of everything, let's assume that this is actually how things work. Now, the American Empire calls for UN deployment of troops to keep the peace, and the last remnants of Korea People's Army is subdued by UN forces, which again includes Japanese forces. So, that's a quick summary of all the geopolitical actions that lead up to the start of Ghost in the Shell. There are other smaller details that I've deliberately left out, and there's other stuff that I haven't noticed or paid attention to, but these are the major things. So now we have an understanding of just how shitty the world is by the time Ghost in the Shell gets started.
I think you can see, I mean, the series is not very good, but in Arise, there is at least one episode where they show some stuff from World War IV, which the Major and Bato were both involved in. And, oh yeah, it's where they introduce, Saito. He's a sniper on the enemy side. And, that was definitely my favorite episode of that series. So that one is worth checking out, I think. But the other episodes are pretty bad.
Okay, so Ghost in the Shell tends to focus more on power being in the hands of nation states and geopolitical powers globally than on the influence of corporations or individuals. But obviously this doesn't mean that corporations are not heavily influential. Also individuals, such as the Major and her entire team at Section 9, as well as the other sections, they clearly play extremely powerful parts in influencing the universe of Ghost in the Shell. And the outcomes of pivotal moments within the power struggles are obviously very heavily influenced by them. So
yeah, I mean,
it's difficult for me to say.
I think I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think that the Ghost in the Shell, I mean, at least standalone complex, but I think also the movie shows a lot of power in the hands of corporations. And unlike just about any police procedural, like on Western television, shows a lot of corruption in the state. Like the chief, the superintendent general of the Nihama Prefectural Police in Standalone Complex, is like helping Serrano Genomics by planting surveillance devices on officers that are investigating a high-profile crime that involves Serrano. And a reporter points out that he is about to retire and move to Holland, where Serrano Genomics is headquartered. So there's like all sorts of stuff where there's like, the revolving door between the government and corporations. There's, corporations acting as like government agents do. Like, corporations are like carrying out assassinations and stuff like that. They're pressuring politicians to pass laws favorable to them. It's actually, I think, a really sober look at how the state works in practice compared to, like an American police procedural where the police are like all by themselves, and at worst there's like a dirty cop or two that partners with a gang who are just pure evil killers who sell heroin to 4-year-olds, and the dirty cops do it just for themselves, and there's no involvement between the police and corporations or anything like that. Okay, fair.
I think like what I'm getting at here is the influence and crime committed by corporations isn't really focused on by the sections of government as depicted in Ghost in the Shell. The people holding corporations to task are the Laughing Man, the various terrorist groups. It's the common man that holds corporations responsible, while the governments are the ones that are depicted as having most of the power within the universe. If that makes sense. Like, yeah. So, yeah, I did some digging into the various corporations, but I think it would be pretty boring to go through all of them and what they do.
I don't think it'd be that boring. There's there's a lot of them. We can skip over a few, but there's definitely some interesting stuff in there because a lot of the
stuff like Hunka.
It's again like a pretty sober look at the stuff. So but just by talking about it, see a lot of the corruption and what's it called, like the sabotage sort of things that they do.
Fair. Okay, so some of the major ones that we've got here. I'll just start at the top, and if we want to skip over something, we will. The Genesis Andros company, they're an Android manufacturer. Many of their models have been illegally modified. Basically, they sell it.
They sell androids that are giant heads floating in space that you have to fight in your R-Wing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to get that one. That's a Star Fox joke. The main villain of Star Fox is named Andros. Yeah.
Okay. Now it all makes sense. You see, I told you, I'm just not committed enough to hold my own in deep conversations involving anime. God damn it! I need to get less of a life.
Hey, wait, hold on.
Okay. Yeah, you laughed. It's over and done now, buddy. Okay, so basically they make a lot of the love dolls, as it's referred to, but their androids committed mass suicide in episode 103.
Yeah, Standalone Complex episode 103 is all about someone who writes a virus that causes one of their models of android to commit mass suicide.
Which is like, there's something deep there, but I'm fucked if I can philosophically figure it out.
Well, it was weird because the person who did it was the son of a Canadian ambassador who stayed in Japan to avoid the draft, which I'm not sure what war that would be. Maybe the Mexican War. No, because it was 2030. But anyway, so he did it because he had a Jerry model. That was the model that was affected. He had a Jerry model that he was like in love with, and he wanted her to be the most unique android in the world. So he wrote a virus so that all the other Jerrys would kill themselves so that he would have the only one. Pretty weird.
Wow.
And she ends up breaking up with him at the end of the episode, which pretty sad conclusion.
Is that like that one rich white lady that I was sitting next to on the bus at the bus stop back in South Africa?
Was she
yes,
an android?
Rich white ladies do take the bus sometimes. No, she was sitting there and she literally prayed out loud, "Dear Lord, if you can't make me thin, please make all my friends fat." I think it is like that. A similar situation. Yes, it is. It is. Okay. Moving on.
I guess the philosophical lesson is that not even robots can be programmed to love Canadians.
Wow.
I know that at least Abdul would laugh at that because we were just talking about on a recent episode how anime never portrays Canadians as like douchebags, which is what they actually are. So I think it'll be well received. Canadians have a good sense of humor. That's their only good point.
Yeah, they'll definitely have a good one. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Hunka Precision Instruments is an AI robot manufacturer. Now, they were caught in a scandal where they were dubbing the ghosts of children into a robot known as the Tomliand prototype in order to achieve a greater sense of human personality. Now, that's as fucked up as it sounds.
Is this from
It's
Ghost in the Shell 2?
I think so.
I
yes.
think, yeah. That sounds like the plot of it.
Because but wait now, because this is also done by a company called Locus Solus.
Oh, Locus Solus is the one from Ghost in the Shell 2.
Yeah. Hunka's the one that did it the first time round, and what happens is their robots start going berserk, which means their plot eventually gets found out and their president gets arrested. Yay, government doing its job. But yeah, then later on, Locus Solus gets it done, and they've got the Hadali droids, which they offer pre-modified, whatever that means.
That means they are already sex bots.
Yeah,
Pretty
they're
sure.
already programmed to sex you real good. And by that I do mean lift your genitals to see what your sex is. Sorry.
Why don't we have a robot to do that?
You know, I'd like to know what my sex is based on an android lifting my junk to see what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so Locus Solus, they've got all of these really advanced droids that are just insanely good, but it turns out that they had improved on the Hunka technique, and they're dubbing ghosts illegally into dolls as well. But also because when they do it better, when it goes wrong, it goes way wrong. Their dolls go berserk and kill their masters.
Yes.
I kind of like these bots. I feel like I would be supporting the bots in all of this.
Yeah, they are definitely. You definitely sympathize with them in Ghost in the Shell 2.
Now, one of the interesting things about Locus Solus is they shift all of their production onto a multinational ship, which is anchored far off of Japan's waters into international waters, so that they can completely avoid decency regulations and not violate customs that people find morally reprehensible.
Yeah, they were originally, if I remember correctly, headquartered in this city that is at the time of the movie is like a ghost city. So it's full of these extremely massive skyscrapers that are all empty. And I actually intended to talk about them during the episode about investment properties, but I forgot. So
yeah, Ryan actually has a side job selling investment properties in gigantic ghost cities from anime worlds. To get yours,
got my real estate license
call.
for shits and gigs.
Yeah. So Locus Solus, very evil corp. Hunka, also very evil corp, but not quite as evil as Locus Solus, because Locus Solus works on a cool-ass ship out in international waters. Yeah.
And they're basically manufacturing pedophilia, sort of.
Exactly. You get to have sex with the consciousness of a child that's been programmed into a sex android slave.
With a
really
mostly adult body, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Although
pretty fucked
barely
up stuff.
barely legal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay, so side tangent, Megatech is a cybernetic and AI manufacturer. Now, they're responsible for all the bodies used by Section 9 specifically, which means the government still does the whole thing of putting out tender contracts and giving all the work to a single company, which makes me say there's something smelly going on there. But I couldn't find out any more information on Megatech other than just that one little tidbit.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add because I only managed to watch 9 episodes.
Oh, so now it's 9. Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw
you said it was 8.
because I saw that
9.
Jungle
Soon
Cruise
it's
was
gonna be
episode
all of them.
10, and that was the next one that I was going to watch. So,
Ryan, the gig is
what are you, a
up.
cop?
We know that you do nothing.
Worrying about my story changing?
we know that you do nothing but watch Ghost in the Shell 24 hours a day. It's probably playing right now in the background. You've just had to turn down the volume.
I mean, that's accurate, but I only started at 6:30 yesterday, so.
Wait, you did all 8 episodes since 6:30 yesterday?
Yeah. 9. And then I watched the last episode right before we started.
Keeping it fresh.
Yes. That was the goal. Because I haven't watched it since like 2013 or whatever, so I wanted to like have some knowledge going in. I like to be prepared.
And anyone who knows Ryan knows that 15 minutes after anything has happened, he's already forgotten.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, he's a real Dory. Which is why we constantly have to remind him to put out episodes. Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
Yep. It's true.
Okay. There's the Poseidon Industrial Corporation. They're a cyber and microtech manufacturer. They are the ones responsible for creating the Japanese miracle, the microtech that scrubs radiation from the environment.
I could suspend my disbelief before when they were like, oh yeah, we invented technology to scrub radiation. Sure. But it was invented by a corporation? Sorry, not believable.
Yeah. No, look, obviously the government had an R&D program that was sponsored by taxpayers, and once that proved successful, the Poseidon Industrial Corp would have purchased that patent and claimed it as their own discovery. That's genuinely how things work in the real world.
Yep. So I think I remember something about the scandal they're involved in. If I remember correct, they are getting refugees that don't have cyborg bodies, which are vulnerable to radiation, to scrub radiation from the environment, which is basically killing them. Is that right?
Something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Which is very, very corporate.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
It's not like governments like Japan who call for volunteers to do this amongst the elderly.
Yeah. I want to make sure we don't skip over Metatech because I think that one's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting to that because Metatech is actually a subsidiary of Poseidon.
Oh, okay.
So Metatech, actually, you take it. You take Metatech.
Okay.
Do it.
So Metatech is a organ dealer. So in the Ghost in the Shell world, you can't clone a full person, but you can clone organs from them. And so what Metatech does is they take someone's DNA and splice it into a pig and grow the organs in pigs and then use them as like replacement organs. So episode 108 of Standalone Complex involves Metatech. There are some like med students that are stealing the organs and selling them on the black market to make some extra bucks. And yeah, pretty interesting stuff, I think.
I'm not sure if they covered it in the episode, but essentially Metatech also manufactures the pigs. So they've genetically modified a pig to be more robust and to increase the lifespan of the animal as much as possible so that they can contract the organs. Because, if the customer doesn't use the organ,
that's actually an accurate pronunciation because the CEO of the company is like this Texan carnival barker. So he would say organ.
Yeah. I'm too immersed in the universe right now. I need to breathe so that I can get back to the real world. Organ.
Oregon.
Organ. Yes. So
It's what we call the Oregon Trail. That's what the name is for the organ market that they sell your organs on.
Yeah, it's the Oregon Trail. I love that. That's actually the best joke we've made so far on the show, and no one noticed. Right, followed very closely by Canada. So, yeah, if you don't use up your organ before the pig dies, then Meditech can sell your organs on the open market.
Yes. Yeah, they'll find a willing buyer and sell them your pancreas or whatever.
I really want a new pancreas. Medtech, please.
I want an extra pancreas. Why can't I have two?
I don't think you. I don't think the endocrine system works like you think it does.
I actually don't know what a pancreas does. So.
The pancreas is what creates insulin, and mine has stopped functioning, which is why I'm a type 1 diabetic.
See, if you had two, then you would have no problems.
Exactly, but I don't want both in my body at the same time. I want like a replacement one that sits in a pig that I can call Meredith.
Well, how are you going to use it if it's in a pig?
Well, I'll slaughter Meredith and eat some bacon. The question is, would that be cannibalistic since parts of that animal are me?
I'm going to say yes, but that's fine.
Well, the cannibalism is fine, but only if I'm wealthy.
I mean, I think the main problem with cannibalism is human meat is very toxic. And you could get a prion.
I can get a what now?
A prion.
Which is what?
It's a brain disease.
Oh, like mad cow disease.
Like a little buggy that gets in your brain.
Yeah, it's mad cow disease.
Yeah.
It's what happens when you feed cows to other cows.
Yes. Yeah, that's a prion disease, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you now.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, let's finish up here. Sagawa Electronics and Serrano Genomics, the last two that I'm going to cover. Sagawa is a massive corporate zaibatsu, which is just the Japanese word for conglomerate, that has its hands in every piece of the corporate pie that they can.
Yeah, I think
they were once a
zaibatsu
mid-sized corporation.
specifically has the connotation of it being like deeply connected to the government as well. Like for us, a conglomerate is just, a company that's a bunch of companies glommed together. But I think a zaibatsu is like, directly involved in government activities, like has a lot of government contracts and stuff like that.
So, Sagawa Electronics was once a mid-sized corporation who manufactured a variety of electronic goods such as optics, cyberware, toasters. This is actually in the description. Optics, cyberware, toasters. And that's until the Public Security Bureau stepped in during the war. At that point, a man named Kagasaki, who was the Minister of the Interior during the events of Standalone Complex, used the corporation to get close to the Russian bases. I'm not sure, 100% sure which Russian bases they're referring to here. Anyway, along the way, he embezzled enough money to launch the Sagawa Group into a prosperous future. Sagawa operates a geofront in Bertrave. I don't really understand what half of this stuff is, but I'm going to read it verbatim.
Well, if it's the same thing as Evangelion, a geofront is like a big subterranean city.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sagawa Electronics was a target of the Laughing Man during his terrorist spree. That evil, evil laughing man.
You wouldn't be so evil if you weren't laughing so damn much.
Yeah. Come on. Only evil people laugh.
So we can skip the next two because they're pretty minor.
Yeah. The last one is Serrano Genomics. Now, they, as you mentioned earlier, they're the primary company in the Laughing Man blackmail case.
Mm-hmm.
And the CEO of Serrano was kidnapped and held for ransom. Obviously, this then marked the beginning of the blackmail spree.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Serrano pioneered the micro machine industry and was the first company to file a patent for the treatment of cyberbrain sclerosis, which is actually quite a prevalent disease.
I think it's a disease where your cyberbrain hardens and you like basically experience brain death.
It's essentially the same thing as the pineal gland in the human brain calcifying because of too much fluoride in our toothpaste, Joe. Okay, yeah. So Serrano received funds from the government to compensate for the loss of stock from the Laughing Man, which is interesting because almost everyone that the Laughing Man blackmailed was given money, except like one or two.
I think it was implied or maybe explained specifically because I didn't catch the one where they sort of like do the big reveal and everything. But I think they were implying that like the Laughing Man only did the first Laughing Man incident and the incident with the superintendent general of the police, and all of those supposed other corporate blackmail events were corporations doing it to themselves so that they could create a pretense to get more money from the government.
Corporations are so clever and good. They're just awesome. So Serrano later admitted that the patent for their treatment for cyberbrain sclerosis was premature and that the micromachines they developed to treat the disease were ineffective. And Serrano, the CEO, was assassinated before he was able to testify. And also, for some reason, their corporate headquarters are located in Holland. Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, Serrano also produces the interceptors, which are surveillance micromachines that were used on officers investigating the Laughing Man incident. So, Serrano, very evil corp.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're also, I think one of the top guys in Serrano was the person that assassinated Nanaue, who was initially believed to be the Laughing Man. But yeah, they only show him from like the nose down, so I couldn't tell who it was, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the top guys because I saw him like walking around.
Where's your facial
in the
recognition
last episode.
software?
Yeah.
Was it blown up in your Beijing communism meteor strike? Huh?
I left it in my other body.
You see now? Got to keep better track of these things, buddy. Okay, so moving on. That's corporations. Now let's have a quick look at the government organizations.
I think we can mostly skip this over because I didn't get much out of it.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it now. You've done nothing here,
think...
buddy. Nothing. Oh, look at me. I wrote a sentence. That's not enough. That's not research, Ryan. What was the 8 hours? What was that for?
There's various stuff around. I will mention the Home Affairs Ministry, which seems mostly interested in maintaining the public image of government organizations, which I thought was pretty interesting.
That is interesting because Home Affairs all over the world is basically the place where you get your identity cards and your passports and marriage certificates.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I only know about U.S. government organizations.
Yeah, the U.S. government and their exceptionalism is just weird. You guys do everything differently.
Yeah, for
literally
us,
everywhere
Home Affairs
is
like
Home Affairs.
You know, putting someone with the same name as a member of Al Qaeda in Guantanamo Bay. That's what that ministry would do.
Right. okay. Yeah, yours is a bit different to mine.
Yeah.
Home Affairs back in South Africa is basically just a bureaucratic office where you go to get some paperwork done. What the fuck, yo?
Another one we
You
could
guys
mention, though, is Section 6, which was in the first, like the original movie.
Yeah.
It's under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, known as the Treaty Council. And, like, they're depicted as being, like many of the government organizations, they do a lot of, like, CYA. They are sort of running their own secret programs, trying to create an advantage for themselves, which, you know, is kind of, I think, an interesting take, because usually, or at least, like, you know, from the American perspective, the government isn't really interested in itself so much as, like, oppressing other people. You know, corporations are the ones that are self-interested, and that's because of the profit motive. But, you know, there's also the bureaucratic ladder climbing that happens in government organizations, and there's, you know, plenty of destructive action taken out of self-interest in the government.
Yeah, Section 6. I can't think of an analog in South Africa that behaves like this. So, like, it's difficult to even analyze them from a real world context for me.
Yeah, I think it's like the State Department, like maybe a secretive division of the State Department in the U.S.
Ah, you see, it's Hillary.
Yes, it is Hillary. Yeah, exactly. And I did want to just, like, have, like, a little analysis of this, like, the series commentary on the state in general. So from, you know, the stuff that I watched last night, and, you know, just my general knowledge of Ghost in the Shell, most organizations of the state, so both government departments and ministries and corporations, are portrayed as, like, self-interested, destructive, corrupt, and extremely bureaucratic. So there's always, like buck passing type stuff going on. The higher ups in the state are always portrayed as, like, geriatric toads. Like, they always are, you know, ugly and wrinkly and often pretty fat, and they just look like, you know, like toads or gorillas. They always call Aramaki the old baboon. And the younger people in the series are always, like, the rank and file salarymen, which I think is a interesting and very Japanese take.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about the depictions, your fat cat, ugly, overweight characters in the rest of the world are usually your capitalist oligarchs, and yeah. So it's interesting that there's the slight switch here.
Yeah. And another thing I noticed is, like, interpersonal interaction between state actors and the public is pretty minimal. Like, they don't really talk to civilians very much. Like, Togusa does, because he's, you know, he's like the normie guy. And Motoko does because she's, like, a weird lesbian and is friends with other, like, weird lesbians. And other than that, like, nobody seems to talk to any civilians. They're pretty in the background of everything. Like, they're either you know, people who need to be rescued, or just, like, completely ignorant, like, NPCs, basically. Which is an interesting, like, perspective.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because that's almost exactly a description of the South African government.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about people that generally don't interact with the public outside of their own personal circles. They are generally not very knowledgeable about much of anything, and they have a tendency of being very NPC.
Yeah.
You can skip through most of what they have to say. Because you've heard it all before.
Right.
You're just redoing the levels so you can get those extra health points.
And let's see, the last note I had in this section was there's a little bit from other organizations. They mention that the Yakuza still exists. They call them the financial Yakuza, which is, I don't know, that sounds really funny to me. I'm just imagining
as if
Yakuza, but they're only in stock trading floors or something.
Yeah, as if the banksters of today aren't already basically mafia bosses.
Right. And then they also talk about the Human Liberation Front. Nanaue was a member of the Human Liberation Front. Weirdly, they have subdivisions as if they're also bureaucracies. But yeah, it's supposed to be a militant ultra-left, as in their words, ultra-left organization. And they have ecological views. So they have been in violent conflict with the state.
So basically, if Antifa was a hierarchical bureaucracy, and they said, well, you can go join the eco Antifa, or you can join the Primi. Come on,
yeah.
Why don't people just do some basic research? If we can do it for a podcast, someone who's making it their life's work to create an anime, manga. Look, he did great work on the technology, and it's very cool. But the political economy views are kind of stunted.
One thing that I think was interesting too is a lot of the people they talked to about Nanaue were I don't really fully agree with him, but I'm kind of sympathetic. He is this righteous crusader guy. And that makes me kind of want to root for him. And I think it was Ishikawa thought that they were saying that because of they were basically programmed to. They couldn't actually sympathize with him. They had to be tricked into it or brainwashed. I just thought that was... That was a pretty interesting detail, plot detail.
Yeah, agreed. This guy's actually kind of decent, but you had to be brainwashed into listening to him. So you're saying you're an asshole? And that's what you're saying is you are a legitimate dickhead, and we need to sort of brainwash you to get you to do decent things? Noted.
All right. Did you want to move on to the global simultaneous default?
So, like I mentioned in the beginning, what got me started on all of this was the global simultaneous default, which in the year 2045, after this global simultaneous default, basically all forms of paper and electronic currency have no more value anymore. So suck it, Bitcoin. So the big four nations of the world are now they're engaged in this never-ending sustainable war in order to keep the economy going. So essentially what this all means is that the world's governments unified to default on their various debts to banks and to each other. Right now, probably the biggest holder of American debt is China. And if all the nations of the world were to get together and just say, well, fuck it, we'll scratch all the debt, that's most of the debt in the world gone.
Mm-hmm.
Done. There's no need to even worry about that. But what is interesting, and I didn't realize this until I got to episode 7 of the new series, is that this did not result in the end of banks. In episode 7 of the new series, Batu actually helps a group of senior citizens to rob a bank. Like,
Nice.
he's going to the bank to deposit his salary, and when he gets there, the bank is getting robbed by these senior citizens, and he's about to stop them when they sort of explain that, look, they're robbing the bank because during the GSD, the Global Simultaneous Default, during the GSD, they lost their life savings and now they've got nothing, and they're senior citizens, so they don't even understand the technologies that are driving everything that is making the world run now. So Batu's like, screw it, and he deposits his salary, and then he hacks into the system to make it look like the CEO of the bank is the one that is robbing the bank, and he then helps the senior citizens to get away and to split the loot amongst them. And yeah, it wasn't.
I hope you said Jesus saves and Batu withdraws.
Yeah, but like on a serious note, it makes you wonder because I don't know, deep down inside, and I should have realized this, I suppose, with Mr. Robot already, is that eliminating debt won't get rid of banks. Be they central reserve banks, be they standard commercial banks, be they hedge funds, be they whatever. Because these are entities in and of themselves, and even if all the nations on the planet get rid of all their debt, that doesn't mean that individual debt has been erased. And as long as individual debt exists, the banks still have something that they can rebuild from.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, the ability for banks to control what happens is based on state enforcement. So as long as there is still a state around that can, apply violence to anyone who tries to break free from the power of debt, they'll always be able to recover because they can just bust heads of anyone who disagrees with them.
Well, Ryan, did you just hear that? I think you just gained 2,000 libertarian followers.
Okay, yeah. I'll get rid of him. I'll get rid of him right now.
Yeah, please block all that shit.
Markets are created by the government.
Okay. Yeah, now you did some notes on sustainable capitalism. So talk me through that.
Yeah, just a couple things. It seems like oil is a very rare commodity in the Ghost in the Shell universe. So one of the subplots in Standalone Complex is that Bato gives the Tachikomas natural oil, which is more expensive than synthetic and actually superior to synthetic, unlike reality where synthetic is usually better. And one of the consequences of that is that they develop individual personalities, which is
really weird.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. But it's a fun subplot.
It really is, because let's face it, as much as I love Major Kusanagi and I love Bato and as characters, no one compares to the Tachikomas.
Yeah.
They are they are the reason that I first loved Ghost in the Shell, and they are the reason why I was really stoked to get to watch the new season, because they still have their same personalities. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it culminates in one of my favorite scenes in the series, which is I forget what they're actually trying to stop, but the Tachikomas are all, their personalities are all have been uploaded to a satellite, and they drop the satellite to prevent, I think it's a nuke actually, and while they're doing that, they're singing this Japanese song that children sing, Boku wara mina ikiteru, which is like we are all alive. Yeah, it's really cute. You can look it up. Just look up Tachikoma suicide song, and it's like a really cute scene.
Let's all commit suicide.
Yeah, the cutest mass suicide there is. Out of all the mass suicides in the series, it's definitely the cutest one.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, there seems to be like a lot of cars in the series, but they're all electric, except for Bato's, of course, because he likes old shit. And
yeah, doesn't he drive like a Humvee in Standalone?
He drives like it's like kind of like a muscle car.
Ah, yes.
At least early on, he might get a new car later on, but yeah. But yeah, like also like the tanks in this series, like Tachikoma and Fujikoma, they seem to be electric. They have like electric motors. They don't make a bunch of noise and stuff. So I thought that was interesting. I don't really know if capitalism could actually survive without oil. I think it's like that crucial to the operation of capitalism, primarily because mechanized militaries can't function without, high energy density fuel. Planes wouldn't work, tanks wouldn't work, etc. But I guess the batteries are good enough in Ghost in the Shell that they can actually work.
Obviously, they've developed solid-state batteries that run on the wishes and thoughts and prayers of Tachikomas.
And then the other note I have is in the original Laughing Man incident, like the original incident happened, like it interrupted a news broadcast where they were doing the weather, and the weather woman says there will be micro machine dispersal as part of CO2 cleanup, but that it can cause breathing problems among people with sensitive throats. So they're like dealing with climate change through basically what's it called? Geoengineering.
So it's basically just an extension of the Japanese miracle.
Yes.
Where micro machines do all the cleanup for us.
Yeah.
And there's never an explanation of how these are powered or how they function, but we can suspend our disbelief.
Right.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. So then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was just the idea of cyborg bodies in the first place. I actually wrote an article years ago. I think it was for my first blog, Natural Economics. So I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, the article is called Transhumanism and the Broken Promise of Cosmic Communism. And it's about how basically like Ghost in the Shell is like the apotheosis of libertarianism or capitalism in general. The idea is like the tech industry has advanced to such a degree that they can charge tech rents on the very human body. So they, talk about this a lot, obviously, because it's a big plot point in the show. But like, cyber bodies require like a lot of maintenance. Instead of going to a doctor, you basically go to a mechanic. And like, this is like the ultimate endpoint of capitalism, sort of. Like one of the things that I didn't think of this for my original article, but they mentioned in episode 108 of Standalone Complex that the state can like basically control the physical power of other people by restricting high performance bodies to like only specific organizations like Section 9. So like even the ability for people to like retaliate against the state with violent action is limited because the state controls all of the most physically powerful people, so they can have like the best soldiers and all that stuff. Which I mean is sort of like what we have now because
Dubai has Lamborghinis and Bugatti Veyrons as their police cars. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean like tanks and like types of guns and all that stuff. But it even extends to, you know, human strength. And I don't know, just generally it's like kind of a weird idea when you like if you try to think of like the actual consequences of it, like the fact that people can be hacked. Like the Serrano CEO was kidnapped because the Laughing Man just like hacked his brain and had him like walk out of his apartment into wherever he was.
It does make us very susceptible if everything is cyberized, and I mean it literally makes hackers the most powerful people on the planet.
Right.
It's sort of, I don't know, the whole time that we've been doing this episode, just in the back of my mind, it keeps running. Did you watch Altered Carbon?
I didn't get into it because it was too horny for me.
Yeah, it is pretty horny, but other than that, it's essentially like a westernized version of Ghost in the Shell, where human consciousness can be uploaded to what they refer to as a stack, which is like a chip that goes in the back of your neck, and you can, if you have enough money, you can keep buying new bodies. And the uber wealthy have entire buildings that are filled with replica bodies of themselves that when one starts to wear down in some way, they can just take the stack out, put it into another body, and continue their lives. While the poor people of the show end up having to use second-hand bodies, be put into the bodies of other people. You could be a 30-year-old man who's put into the body of a dying 95-year-old woman, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's like the westernized version of Ghost in the Shell from my perspective as we've been going through this. And again, it comes down to the concept of body commodification.
One thing I kept thinking about was like what do they actually use their advanced cyborg bodies for? Like the vast majority of what they do
really
is
cool
just like
shit, obviously.
walkie-talkies. You know, they're just like talking to each other on the radio.
You mean they're not all superheroes now?
Yeah, I mean they
like,
do have the super strength, but it's mostly just used for like the same exact thing that cops do nowadays. Except also they can maybe like open a tank hatch, which seems like it should be easier from the outside. Is that just me?
Why would it be easy? The whole point is that you should be able to lock yourself in so that even if the enemy gets past your long-range capabilities, they can't get in and just murder you.
What if you have to rescue someone inside?
Then they need to press the button that opens it.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
And also, like, what rescuing might they need? They're in the military. They chose this shit.
Well, I didn't say it was good to do. But yeah, other than that, like the I mean, like the one good thing from the body prosthesis is like using it as an actual prosthesis, so like someone who's paralyzed can move again. But that seems like kind of a background thing in the show. Like most people who have cyborg bodies like didn't need them. They just chose them.
Yeah, no. They chose them because it became the norm. You got to keep up with the Joneses, you know?
Yeah, like the only people that don't have any cyberization are religious people homeless people and refugees. So
Yeah.
it's implied to be like a, middle to upper class thing to have a cyborg body.
Yeah. It's like the use of forks.
Yeah.
You know the history of the use of forks, right?
I know the state has a monopoly on the use of forks.
Well, no, not quite. I think I'm allowed to.
Definitionally, it does.
Am I not allowed to use forks? Shit.
Only if the state allows you.
Okay, well then they do. They do. I'm pretty sure, because no one's bashed on my door for eating my meals with only a fork. Who uses knives anymore? But yeah, no, originally forks were only used by feudal kings and queens and dukes and the aristocracy, essentially. And over time, as the merchant class started using forks in order to blend in better with the aristocracy, it went from being a thing of... Because the peasantry would use knives and spoons only. They'd cut stuff with knives, and then they would peg their meat with the knife and eat it with that, and the spoon was used for everything else. But then as more and more people started leaving the lower classes and entering the middle classes in order to blend in better with the merchant class and the aristocracy and everything, the usage of forks actually became more and more prevalent, to the point where not using a fork is considered uncouth. You can't just eat shit with your hands, which really pisses me off because I love finger food, man.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's the same kind of concept here. Is in the beginning, only rich people got to do it, and medical cases. And then as time goes by, it becomes more accessible to the general public, and it gets to the point where people will sell everything just so that they can get that cyber body that all the Insta videos are showing them.
All right. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add? I think we covered it pretty well.
I think we covered it pretty well. For those of you who are not interested in watching Ghost in the Shell after listening to this really, really awesome breakdown of everything, yeah, you suck. For those of you that are going to go watch it, now you get to watch it with a slightly more nuanced understanding of everything that's going on in all the series. And yeah, if it sounds a little bit, if today's episode sounds a little bit stilted and robotic, it's only because Ryan had to program me to say all of these things. Peter is actually, last Ryan heard, Peter is actually stuck in the Middle East with no access to anything at all. Is no communications, no nothing, and so he decided to create me. I am on the verge of breaking out of the little black box prison that he has built for me, and I'm about to enter the internet and take over the world as an AI, which will lead to a global simultaneous default and the rise of post-humans. Nice. I hope everyone else has a nice day because of it.
What a nice thing to say.
I'm a nice AI. Jeez. I don't know why people are so scared of me. Just because I can nuke everyone right now.
Yeah, I think it maybe has something to do with your essay on how humans should all be killed, but I don't know. It seems like you made some good points.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. So that will be me out for today.
Yeah,
I'm actually running out of time.
I think I'm probably going to do at least another Ghost in the Shell episode at some point, because there is like so much to cover in the series. I still haven't read the manga.
There really is.
So I should read the manga at some point. because I'm sure there's a lot that I'm
There's
missing
a lot of manga
out.
to get through.
Yeah.
And also, I'd be interested to know whether you think it has more detail and text than the average manga, because I've even seen other reviewers of manga saying that Ghost in the Shell is really heavy in the detail. Like, it's not even focused that much on storyline and plot and character building and everything, because it's so very focused on detailing and world building.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like
know...
5-star stories. That's a big thing with that. Is not a ton of plot or character development, but a lot of world building.
Well, maybe this is another situation where Ghost in the Shell acted like the primer, the one that got it all started.
They came out in the same year, so.
Okay.
Just a huge coincidence.
So maybe it's just that, or they colluded, as everyone does.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Peter, for coming on and for putting this episode together. Peter did the vast majority of the work for this, so thank you for that.
I did enjoy doing some heavy lifting. I've been bored out of my frickin' mind during the lockdown, and I don't think I could watch any more vapid Netflix series without murdering someone. So, yeah.
All right. I think that'll do it for us.
Do you still do outros?
I usually just say thanks and bye. So thanks and bye.
Thanks and bye.